I believe most listeners to Mountainside FM, they do believe, like I, that New Zealand is now becoming very close to a crisis point. We've been talking about it now for a number of years, how New Zealand is changing and how we're moving away from one people, one vote, one law, to this dreadful nonsense of Maori who think they have the right of partnership. And it's interesting that Don Brash is one of the very few politicians or ex-politicians who are prepared to stand up high on the parapet and explain to New Zealanders just how we are being hoodwinked and how New Zealand is being damaged. And the reason why most people who are reasonably intelligent are certainly either they've left New Zealand to go to another country to call it home, or are about to do so. I know my whole family now live in Australia because they realised that New Zealand was on a beating to nowhere with the fact of the Mahutas and the Jacksons and the rest of these Willie Wonka, Tuku Morgans and what have you, and the damage they're doing to New Zealand. And Don Brash said it's impossible to avoid the conclusion that New Zealand is rapidly approaching a crisis point. There are now two fundamentally different views of our future, and there is no way to reconcile them. And isn't that sad? That is what has happened. These Maoris so think that they're so bloody clever, they're still only one step away from being stone-aged individuals, and they think that they can take over a country that was developed, that was the infrastructure and what have you, who was put in there by the settlers and the colonialists, and they think that they know better than that. On the one hand, we have a view implicit in the government program that New Zealand is not a single country with citizens having equal rights, irrespective of when they or their ancestors arrived in New Zealand, but rather a country with two classes of citizen. In one class are those who chance to have one or more Maori ancestors, how embarrassing, also now with ancestors of other ethnicities, often indeed with those other ethnicities being in the majority. In the other class are all the other New Zealanders, and those with one or more Maori ancestors have by virtue of that ancestry inherently superior rights. Hey? Superior rights given to a cunning pack of liars. It is this view of New Zealand society which explains the government's determination to grant Maori tribes half the voting rights in the 4 3-water entities, the creation of a separate Maori health authority, the pressure on local government to create separate Maori wards, the rewriting of our school history curriculum, the obligation on the Canterbury Regional Council to provide extra seats for the local tribe, the attempt to give Maori and Rotorua disproportionate votes on the local council, and it goes on and on and on and all the rest. This view has been driven by Maori politicians such as Nanaia Mahuta, this Willie Jackson, that little creep, and Kelvin Davis, who I just can't stand the guy, greatly assisted by the gross ignorance about the treaty on the part of too many political leaders, notably that Jacinda Ardern woman and Chris Hipkins, both of whom, when asked about the treaty, mumbled something about partnership. That ignorance has been fostered by the partisan advocacy of the Waitangi Tribunal, which, contrary to the long-agreed interpretation of what happened when the treaty was signed in 1840, has recently taken to asserting against all the evidence of the speeches made by the chiefs who signed that treaty, and again subsequently at the Kohimarama Conference in 1860, that the treaty did not involve Maori ceding sovereignty to the Queen. It's been fostered also by the writing of some Pākehā historians such as this Claudia Orange, She at least had the good grace to admit in an interview with Audrey Young in the New Zealand Herald on the 7th of February that the general public is not aware that we are going through a huge revolutionary changes in the country, and in fact we have taken that such a long way there seems to be no going back. And why is there no going back? Because the dipstick Kiwi, the real Kiwi, has allowed this to happen. The dipstick Kiwi will sit there and have this Maori name change on everything and no one says anything. They sit there like big blobs of blood and they're all too scared to stand up and say, enough is enough, we are not having any more of this. And I think the only way, between you and me, we only have one hope at the moment, and that is at the next elections we've got to vote for someone like Winston Peters, who has always stood for a complete New Zealand, that all residents of New Zealand are the same, and that we do honour the Crown. And the drop kicks like Luxton, they don't know where they stand. They move from breeze to breeze. They move at the slightest wisp so they don't upset the Maori. And who the hell could give a stuff if you upset the Maori? I couldn't give a stuff if I upset any Maori. In fact, I don't like them very much anymore. These particular ones who, the rank and file Maori are all right, but I wish they would stand up and say, this is not good. But they seem to be gutless also. But this elite Maori group, and there's a huge number of them, are in it for their own wealth and for their own personal improved situation. Nothing to do with what is best for New Zealand and certainly what is good for the people of New Zealand, including their own people. Yet we are moving very, very fast to being another Papua New Guinea or Zimbabwe. If it could be shown that the Treaty of Waitangi, did not provide for equal citizenship, we would have to abandon it. There is no future for New Zealand, absolutely none at all, if some citizens are accorded superior rights based on their ancestry